Welcome to a special mailbag episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where I, Adam, am sitting down with one of our Patreon subscribers, Scott, who has generously become one of our patrons of Metallic Greatworm tier. That means that he's able to sit down and record an episode with us, and he decided that today we're going to be creating some NPCs for the module he's running for his players called Extinction Curse. Well, you thought I was going to say Wild Beyond the Witchlight, didn't you? No, today we're visiting D&D's estranged half-brother, Pathfinder, and going over a really unique mechanic that I'm sure we're all going to want to steal for our Witchlight carnivals and Rakdos cults and wandering domain of wonder known as the Carnival that wanders between the domains of dread and the Shadowfell. It is amazing how many carnivals and circuses inhabit our fantasy tabletop role-playing games, and there's always room for a few more colorful characters. But before we get into those colorful characters, let's take a few moments to dive into the history of this new colorful character, Scott. And we're going to sit down and talk a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from on tabletop role-playing games and your experience and your nerd cred and all that. But before we do anything else, you have a tradition.
I do have a tradition. It is a tradition of mine every time before I play D&D, I take a shot on my way out the door. So I have a shot of whiskey here. What do you got your shot of?
Oh, I'm working on a whiskey as well. What kind of whiskey are you drinking?
I'm drinking Buffalo Trace bourbon.
Ooh, a bourbon. I've got Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey. So,
Ooh.
yeah.
Well, hey, cheers to that.
Cheers. It's 11 a.m. and I am doing a shot of whiskey. It's a good Saturday. All right.
Look, at least it's noon for me.
Yeah. All right. Cheers. Oh.
Yeah. See, and I'm of the opinion that the best chaser for whiskey is a sip of water, because then you'll get different flavors.
I agree with you. Water and ice bring out different flavors with your whiskey.
Yep.
That is a sipping whiskey, and I'd forgotten that.
To be fair, mine kind of is a sipping whiskey too, but
No, the worst part of that was that I had a glass of orange juice before we started recording.
Adam.
Yeah, didn't think that one through. But here we are. Well, I died slowly underneath the desk. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? What do you do? Like, who is Scott?
Yeah, so I am from Colorado, been here pretty much my whole life. Grew up out in the middle of nowhere, but I've been living in the Denver metro for the past, coming up 5 years now. Yeah, I am a customer service rep for a small company, but I'm working on my accounting degree. So hopefully someday I will get a CPA and be a rich accountant who can buy all the minis he wants.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Honestly.
Okay, I've got to ask before we go any further. There's a lot of things in D&D and whatnot about like hell dimensions, and Pathfinder's got hell dimensions and demons and devils and whatnot. So can you explain your airport to me?
So DIA, it's a magical little place. They have about 40 different conspiracy theories, depending on who you ask.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorites is that it's where the lizard people Illuminati meet in the underground of DIA. They always say that there's like underground bunkers and tunnels under DIA, which honestly I believe. Denver has the second largest concentration of federal buildings outside of Washington, D.C. So, yeah, if something happened to D.C., Denver would be the new capital.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's weird. Like, why Colorado? Like, why Denver of all places?
I honestly couldn't tell you why, but to think about it, if let's just say some country did something and DC is not operable, good luck with Denver. We're smack dab in the middle of the country, backed against the Rocky Mountains.
I want you to know that there's definitely weird shit that goes on at that airport. This is totally a sidebar for the rest of the conversation. I was not expecting to have this conversation, but I flew through Denver for the first time back in August, and it was one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. There was a person dressed as a monk that was literally grabbing just random people to hold a prayer circle in the middle of the terminal. And when that was done, he started to help people do yoga. And so there was a monk running yoga circles. I had about a 4-hour layover, and I got to watch this for about an hour and a half from my seat as this guy was just pulling random people in and praising them to Jesus and then doing a whole bunch of like contortionist moves and one of that I am fairly certain are not part of yoga. And then security showed up. And the thing that stuck out to me more than anything else was, how did you get back in here? And then he ran away and they chased him and tackled him down. So this guy
That's not
clearly
common.
gets behind security lines somehow to hold prayer circles and yoga circles. And it was the most bizarre experience of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So
And you didn't even get to see Lucifer.
no, I didn't. I wanted to, but I couldn't from any of the windows that I could see. So that's okay. There's enough other weird art displays and a giant Abraham Lincoln that said civility. He was like 2 stories tall, and it was just very, very strange being in there.
Yeah, well, you probably won't see Lucifer from inside the airport. He's just a hop, skip, and a jump out, but he's on the only road leading to the airport. So it's real fun at night when you're like, what are those 2 red dots? Oh, those are his eyes.
For those of you who don't know, Lucifer is a giant demonic. Does he breathe fire?
I don't think he actually does, no.
Okay. A lot of the pictures I've seen online I guess they've photoshopped in fire. He's a giant demonic looking horse statue out front of the Denver airport. It's fucking wild. I love it. Anyway,
It's about 2 or 3 stories tall, so
it's terrifying. Let's get back to tabletop role-playing games. And actually, what's your history with them? How long have you been playing them, and what have you been playing?
yeah, so I played my first tabletop role-playing game, I want to say early high school. So I had one of my younger brother's buddies had a Warhammer 40K role-playing game, and he talked me into playing a couple of weekends. It didn't go anywhere, but that was my first introduction. Came back to it shortly after the pandemic. One of my neighbors, one of my old coworkers, same person, he was hosting D&D, so we would play at his place, which is why I started my tradition of take a shot on your way out the door, because I just have to walk across the street.
Fair enough.
Played 5th edition, have quite the tumultuous relationship with it, as every single game I have been in has folded for one reason or another. Every single one.
Is it because of the campaigns or the mechanics, or is it just like life?
It's life and personality clashes. I became very disinterested when I got to experience unnecessary fantasy racism coupled with torture.
Yeah, that's no fun. It is amazing how many people out there use tabletop role-playing games to force other people into their own weird ideas and politics and bullshit. So
Yeah, it was no fun. So I don't play with him anymore.
mhm.
In fact, so before we get there, I'll cover why we're talking Pathfinder today and not D&D. Um, I'm sure we all had our own little reactions and fits that we threw when we heard about the OGL nonsense earlier in the year.
Yep.
And of course, my knee jerk throwing a fit was fine, I'll check out Pathfinder. Well, one of the big differences with Pathfinder is it's a very crunchy game. The numbers are very well thought out, tried, tested. And as someone going to school for accounting, I love this. I love the numbers and how crunchy and how they make scaling work and everything. It's good time. So I am running a campaign, Extinction Curse, for 2 players right now. They are both my roommates because I'm not going to have them say, oh no, I'm busy. Where are you gonna be? At home? I'll be there too. So it's my boyfriend and his identical twin brother.
Oh, gee, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Oh man, you should try living with twins. It is a trip.
I got to assume that. Okay, do they do weird twin stuff?
Yeah, when I first moved in with them, since they've known each other for 24 years now, they don't always have to speak in complete sentences to each other. So they'll say half sentences, the other person will understand it, and then they'll just keep going back and forth like that. Well, one time they were doing 3 conversations at a time like that, and one of the conversations they wanted my input, and they decided it would take too long to get me caught up on what they were talking about, then it just wasn't worth my input. Also,
I,
they're gonna hate me for telling that story.
I've got a couple of uncles that are twins, and Dan's got a couple of kids that are twins. So I've got twins around in my life, and they always say, no, there's no weird twin stuff, and then there's absolutely weird twin stuff.
I mean, it's not like weird stuff like it's just like they know each other that well. They don't have to talk in full sentences to know what they're talking about.
Oh no, Dan's kids are freaking weird twin stuff. They're outright unsettling. I think they might be the girls from The Shining. So, besides D&D and Pathfinder and twins, what else do you do? What other fandoms are you a part of? Skills, personal details, things to help us paint the picture of Scott.
Yeah, I'm an avid video game player. Starfield has owned my life for the past couple of months. But unfortunately, between working a full-time job and going to school part-time, I don't have room for any more hobbies. That's all I got. I do Pathfinder and I play games when I can.
That's fair. What's your favorite not D&D IP? Like, what's your favorite fandom?
Skyrim. Skyrim owns my heart and soul. I have played thousands of hours of that game across like 4 different consoles.
Skyrim is the game that I have sat down and watched other people play enough, and I know I cannot play Skyrim. It would be a bad idea. This podcast would falter and fail and disappear off the face of the planet. There would be no more D&D, and I would forget that I have a fiance. I get so honed in on deep games, and Skyrim would eat my face. So
well, we like Mieko, so don't go around doing that.
So besides the fact that you're playing with twins, what else about your table, the characters, the players, should we know before we get into this?
Yeah, so I am doing 2 different optional rules for my characters. One of them is going to be called Dual Class. It had its origins in, I think, 3.5 with a different name that I can't pronounce, so help me out here.
Dual Class.
Well, it starts with a G, what they called it in...
The Gestalt.
Yeah, I can't pronounce that, so I ain't gonna try.
Fair enough.
Pathfinder calls it Dual Class, and you know what? That makes sense.
Yeah, look, fair enough. It's that is an old holder. I don't think it was ever official rules. It was just something like crit tables in 5th edition. It's just something people do. It's part of the zeitgeist, but I don't think that it was, because I know that Dan played it in 5th edition as well with a couple of people, and there's clearly not rules for that. Like you just level up twice as often and with more fun shit to do. So
nope, it is official optional rules in Pathfinder. Yeah, you pick 2 classes and you level up in them. I'm also running free archetype. Archetypes are something that are not in D&D. Honestly, the best way to describe archetypes is you have a whole line of like feats that are all in a specific type of category. Typically, you have to trade class feats, because in Pathfinder, you get feats literally every level. There's skill feats, general feats, ancestry feats, because we call them ancestries and not races in Pathfinder.
Yep.
And then we have your class feats, and you get at least 1, if not like upwards of 3 every single level.
Okay.
So Extinction Curse has like the juggler archetype, where you want to juggle knives as you throw them in combat. Take the juggler archetype.
There's so much more customizability
Extremely.
in Pathfinder, and I find that the difference between, we're not going to do a D&D versus Pathfinder podcast today, but I find that for those that are listening that haven't looked into it, D&D is so broad and open. You can do anything and make it up as you go, and it will work. You can juggle knives and throw them as just about any character. Any rogue can do that, no problem. You just need a high enough dex and sleight of hand, right? And then you're able to do that. However, Pathfinder, and I'm going back to my 3.5 days, and I dabbled with Pathfinder 1st edition. You're playing 2nd edition, right?
Correct. I am playing 2nd edition.
They are so chunky, and there's so many trees and paths to go down. I always joke Pathfinder is called Pathfinder because of the character progression path that you've got to pick, right? And there are optimal ways to do things, suboptimal ways, clearly, but you can have two characters playing the same class or from the same ancestry that are very thematically the same but very mechanically different. In Pathfinder, there's rules for just about everything.
And that's what I really like as a DM. Like in 5th edition, yeah, sure, let's do everything flavors free. I love it. But now it's up to me to figure out how that all works. In Pathfinder, there is a rule on how this works and how it gets played, which takes it alleviates a lot of that from me as a DM. I don't have to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to make you roll to juggle knives in combat as you want to throw them at enemies?
Mm-hmm.
Pathfinder has rules for that.
And that is one of the things that I like about Pathfinder, because I'm a rules guy. Like, you hear the episodes, I sit there and rant about, we need a rule for this, we need a rule for this. However, I will say this, I find that most players that get caught up in the mechanics and the crunch, I'm speaking specifically of players that I've experienced, will care less about the story and the plot if they are busy worried about which modifiers are they putting together and whatnot. Having my characters be able to lean back and not worry about rules, not have to be flipping through rule books during other people's turns and whatnot, keeps them engaged at the table in a different way. Yeah, that's like the Pathfinder method, the crunch is still engagement. It is just a different kind of engagement, right? And so we talk a lot on the podcast about storytelling. And I find that if you relax the rules, then it's a lot more fluid. Pathfinder has very specific rules about everything. So I find that you can lock yourself in to different ideas really solidly. Like, if you are juggling knives, for example, if your knives are on fire or they do acid damage or those knives are actually darts or something, there may be a rule for that, but you may have to go to another book. You may have to go digging through bits and pieces, and that makes it, at least what I found with 3.5 and first edition of Pathfinder, that was a huge weight on the pocketbook, on your wallet, to be able to have all of those books, to be able to find all of the stuff.
So now with 2nd edition, they actually have a completely official, and even 1st edition of Pathfinder, they have a completely official online source of all of the rules for free. So
does that include
it is
all of the little rules and stuff that you're going to find in the modules and the adventure paths?
yes, but no. Like, it has all the backgrounds for this module. It has the archetypes, the weapons, the spells. It does not have my circus sub rules.
Okay.
Like, my subsystem for circuses is not on that website,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. I mean, I can buy the book for what, $20? You just need the first book and it has all the rules for it.
I just remember sitting there playing and being at a severe disadvantage because I only owned 3 books, and the guy beside me with rich parents had 25 books and just had the better min-maxy character that could do more and would leave me in the dust. And that's the fault. That's a failing of 3.5. I'm not putting that on Pathfinder 2nd edition. But it's one of the reasons why I'm pretty solidly 5th edition for now. Now that the OGL has settled, I don't have any massive complaints. Although they keep trying to come up with controversy every time they release a fucking book. So
see, and I wouldn't know. I've been so detached. Listening to you guys is the most input I get on how it's going.
Well, we try not to bitch on the topical things because there's no repeat listen value to me going off about AI art in a book that was published 7 years ago, right? So
you're right. You just do that on the Discord channel.
You're damn right I do. If you are not one of the patrons and you would like to hear me rant regularly, join up and get access to the Discord channel.
It's a fun time. I'm not gonna lie. I thoroughly enjoy it.
So clearly we're dealing with a circus, a carnival, right? In your campaign. Is there anything in particular we need to know about plot or setting?
So the setting, we're just kind of on a small island right now. We're in chapter 2 of 4 on book 1 of 6. This campaign will take us from level 1 to 20. We're currently level 2. We're just on a small island close to a larger island with one of the biggest towns in the entire of Pathfinder universe. We are starting a new circus. One of my 2 players has decided that his background, he ran away from the other circus because the ringleader of that circus treats her performers as nothing more than slaves.
I
So
mean, we don't kink shame, but go on.
we'll get to her in another book. I just don't have that book. Where was I? Oh, yes. So right now we joined this new circus with a whole ton of people that left that other circus and a couple of extras, but most of them came from this other circus. On the very first performance of this circus, the ringleader dies,
Oh,
murdered by a horde of venomous snakes. My players have found this, so I don't feel bad about sharing it. So literally right before the show is about to start, the ringleader's found dead, and no one knows the order you have to perform in. So session 1, let's run a circus.
fun.
We can get into how the whole circus subsystem goes in a moment, but that is kind of where we're at now. I don't know the whole plot as I'm running a module, and it's 6 books, and I did not want to buy all 6 books at once, so I bought book 1.
Yeah, that's another big difference between Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons is for Pathfinder, they separated into smaller softcover books so that it's little chapters, like one contained story that runs 1 to 4 or
Yep.
3 levels or something, right?
This book is 1 to 4. It's 92 pages long. It contains the first 1 to 4 levels, all of the circus subsystem rules, and then additional, like the backgrounds, the archetypes, the
Is there a
weapons.
bestiary in the back of it?
Yes, there is. Here, there's one where my players have already fought this character. She gets a whole 2 pages about her. So here, I have my camera on so you can see.
Oh, all right. Nice.
Yeah, they fought her and killed her.
That's more lore than we get on most of the NPCs in D&D. So
Oh, yeah.
Is there a lot of good useful role-playing tips and hints and whatnot in there?
Yeah, I would say probably more than in D&D, although I have never run a D&D module. I've only been players for those modules. But
It depends on the module. Some of them are really well fleshed out and they give you hints and tips, and some of them just leave you completely on your own. So
this one does good on hints and tips. But there is a podcast I listen to where they have a whole live play of this game, and I just unapologetically steal from what that DM does. Not even gonna apologize about it, but they're good. They add a lot of character to a lot of these characters, and I'm like, that's how I'm gonna do it.
Yep, fair enough. Fair enough. Is there anything else we should know about your campaign before we jump into it?
Not really. I mean, that's the crux of it. We're running a circus. It's called Extinction Curse because, as I read through the synopsis, eventually someone's going to try to literally get rid of all life on the planet, and we have to stop the extinction curse by harnessing the power of a dead god. But I don't know how that plays in yet because, well, again, I didn't buy the books.
It's wild that storyline starts from a place of like a circus.
Yeah, right? I know, right?
That's interesting. That's interesting plotting for me.
So in every book, they add additional circus performers. We'll be making some today, and I will be adding them in place of the NPCs they provide in the future.
So why did you choose this campaign? Out of all the campaigns out there, why this one?
So I had a hard time deciding. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. On Paizo's website, for all of their adventure paths, they have little videos on like, hey, this is like the trailer for the campaign. And I sat down with my roommates, who are my players, and played all of the videos for them and said, what do we want to play? And they were so excited for a circus. So I said, okay, we'll play Extinction Curse.
Fair. Yeah, that's fun. And it sounds like the circus is actually a major feature for a while, and not like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, where the circus is chapter 1, and then I don't think you ever deal with a circus again after that.
Yeah, so I have read, since it is a level 1 to 20 campaign, towards the end of the campaign, I think what I've seen online is about halfway through, the circus kind of fades into the background. But
Well,
I mean,
that's totally understandable. What happens in tier 4 rarely has anything to do with tier 1. So
yeah, but my players like a circus, so I will be having level 17 characters putting on quite the circus performance.
fair. All right, so let's jump into the actual mechanics here of what we're dealing with, because the idea here is we're going to build a couple of NPCs, maybe a few depending on time restraints, but there's a specific mechanic that we've got to look at, and it's going to be based mostly around the idea of skills, right? So let's go into it, because Pathfinder skills are a little bit different than D&D skills, and most of our listeners will need a little touchstone here because they're not going to be familiar with Pathfinder. So when it comes to the skills in Pathfinder, we have acrobatics, arcana, athletics, and then we have crafting. And crafting it has its own rule set, unlike D&D, where in a future episode you will hear us rant and bitch and complain about the crafting. We have an entire episode that's going to be dedicated to it. And then deception, but diplomacy. And diplomacy, as far as I can tell, takes place of the persuasion skill in
Pretty much, yeah.
5th edition. So there's intimidation, and then there's lore. And this is a holdover from 3.5. And I miss my lore skill. And this is whether or not you have knowledge about certain things, right? And so do you choose to put ranks into skills, or do they just automatically get them based on other decisions?
So you do pick. So your ancestry will never give you a skill. So I don't know why I brought that up. Your background will often give you a lore skill. So whichever background you pick will give you a relevant lore skill. I can literally pull up a background here if I felt like it to give it to you, but like one of the backgrounds is a clown. You get circus lore.
I mean, that's fair enough, right? But it's going to be things that make sense for this particular character to understand and to know. I really miss having lore and knowledges and crafts as different skills to have for players. But I mean, it frustrates me that we also don't have any gather information, right?
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a minute here as
well. There's a whole role for that in Pathfinder.
Yeah.
I also can cover how skills differ in proficiency if you'd like me to do that now or later.
Yeah, sure. Hold on one second. Let me go through the rest of the list here. So medicine and nature sound relatively normal. But then there's occultism, and occultism is how would you describe it as being different from arcana?
So arcana is going to be, well, obviously it's your arcane. So it's, your study of like high magic and that kind of stuff. Occultism, on the other hand, is more like your ghosts, spirits, voodoo, that kind of stuff.
Which is different than religion, which we also have, right? So
which, yes, is gods and deities.
Yeah. There's performance, there's society, which I believe is your gather information skill, right?
It's gather information on humans. It's how well do you know societies as a whole, how people behave, operate, different ancestries, and that kind of stuff.
Cultures and languages and customs and whatnot. Yeah. Stealth is pretty familiar, and survival is pretty familiar, and then we have thievery, which covers sleight of hand and all other pickpocketing needs, right? So
yep, it's pretty much sleight of hand,
and that's all of it. It does a pretty good job of covering the bases, although it does split arcana and occultism, and it instead of just it being arcana or religion in 5th edition, and it adds crafting and lore, which I really like. So when we talk about the skills today, what we're doing is we're actually going to be attributing them to traits. And so, as I understand it, I did a very little bit of research based on a couple of photos that you took of the book and you sent to me beforehand. I have some basic idea of how this works, and what we're going to be doing is creating a circus NPC, and that NPC is going to have one kind of act that they do. And associated with that is going to be what's called a trick, which forces you to do certain kind of rolls depending on the trick, different kind of skill checks to be able to determine success or failure, which will then impact the audience, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So one of the basic things that I was able to glean from the little bit of information I got was that if you use the same trick in the same act, then you get a -5 the second time you use it, and a -10 on the third time, and every other roll after that is a -10.
And those
Right.
numbers are used elsewhere in Pathfinder. That's your multiple attack penalty if you want to attack more than once in a turn, because Pathfinder has a completely different action economy.
Yeah, which is wild, and I would love to talk about it, but we don't have room on it today. But it's very interesting. But the -5 and the -10 are what you get on the trick rolls that you'll be doing, right? It seems like there is a scale for excitement and anticipation as well.
Yeah. So essentially your anticipation is how like excited people are to show up to your circus and what they're expecting to see. The biggest way to honestly gain anticipation is to advertise that your circus is going to perform.
Fair.
Yeah.
Are there mechanics for that?
Yes, there are. There
Okay.
are, hold on, I'm flipping through my book. Nope, not that page. There are 12 different tiers of advertisements
Holy
that
shit.
the circus can purchase, ranging from 1 gold to 3,000 gold.
And this is the thing where if you were to add a mechanic like that into 5th edition, people would complain that it doesn't feel like D&D because it's a game within a game. But because Pathfinder is so crunchy and there are so many rules, any additional rule that's added is just another one in this massive, grab bag of rules that you can use. And that's not a bad thing.
Oh,
Right?
I ignore well over half of the rules because it's nothing that my party's doing.
Yeah.
The witch class, I don't care about anything it can do or does do.
Mm-hmm.
No one's playing a witch in my campaign.
What's the excitement rules? That's, I assume, if you succeed, then your excitement goes up, and that.
So yes.
But what's the benefit of that in the game? Just more money?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
You gain excitement from either a success or a critical success. Criticals in Pathfinder are a little different. You get a critical success or failure for rolling 10 over or under your DC. So if my DC is 16 and I get a 26, that's a critical success. Does not matter if I rolled a natural 20.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
part of the
you're
math
not
I
dealing
like.
with bounded accuracy, right? You're dealing with a lot more with modifiers and scaling, right? So
Yes.
that makes a lot of sense.
Because you add your level to your proficiency modifier every time. So you get higher bonuses the higher you level up.
This is another major difference. This is another major difference between Pathfinder and D&D is in Pathfinder, you become a specialist as you go on, become very, very good at some things, but you will never get better at anything else. And so you got to leave that stuff behind. If you never deal with stealth, you never touch it on your character sheet, then at high levels, that stealth is going to really suck. You will be not stealthy at all. Good luck. Whereas bounded accuracy kind of keeps it a fairly level playing field, and everyone is more broad.
Well, and then we have 4 tiers of proficiency with skill.
I really, really love the math puzzle of Pathfinder.
Oh, me too.
But I know that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 players at my table that would not be interested in sitting down and hashing that out. So,
one of my players is not like that, which, mind you, one of them is half of my players. He just decides this is what he's going to do, and it's my responsibility to sift through the rules to tell him how it's going to play out. He is pure chaos, and I absolutely love it.
There's something to be said for that. Like old school D&D put all of the onus on the DM for all of the rules, but also for all of the roles, right? The idea of having your player be in control of everything they can do, including their own roles and their character progression, is something that has evolved through the years, right? So players that are like, hey, you know what? You figured it out, you do it. These days, a lot of people would be annoyed by that, but honestly, that's kind of vintage D&D, right?
Yeah, well, and Pathfinder has the rules for that, so you tell me what you want to do, and I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, right? So, Now,
So yes, when you roll your success or critical success, you gain excitement.
and then that
Um,
excitement equals gold, and then gold unlocks your ability to.
yes. So if your circus performance is considered a success, if your excitement is more than your anticipation. People were anticipating your performance, and they were more excited in their performance than they were excited to show up, which is great.
Yeah,
We all want to be pleasantly surprised that something was better than we thought it was going to be.
I did that in the
Um,
Barbie movie.
I
So.
haven't seen it. Oh, I still need to. So you add your prestige and final anticipation, and that's your payout in gold. Now, if you equal out your excitement and anticipation, you get double the gold. Now,
Well,
if
yeah,
you're
that's gonna be harder to do too, because again, you're not stuck with bounded accuracy, right? So you're not dealing with like a 1 to 20, or maybe it goes up to 22. Like you can go up into the 40s in Pathfinder. Like
easy.
it's more difficult to land on a specific goal number. So
Yep. Although there are some traits that'll help out with that. We'll get to those later.
sure.
Now, if your excitement does not meet or surpass your anticipation, you get 1/4 of the payout.
Oof.
25% of the payout. That's all you get.
Even if you miss it by one,
Even if you miss it by one. They
rough.
were excited to show up and you kind of left them hanging.
What are the co-star rules?
Co-star rules. This is something that my players have never done because they don't want to share the spotlight with anybody.
As I understand it, you do large acts that involve multiple people doing multiple tricks, and therefore you've got co-stars with you. Is that
Kind of.
yeah?
So there are 4 acts in the circus. You have the opener, which is just one person doing their trick. Then you have the build-up, which is 2 people doing tricks side by side. Now, you can co-star, or you can have 2 people doing their own tricks, and a different part of the audience will just be watching a different performance.
Okay.
Moving on, you have the big number, which is one person center stage all on their own. And then the finale is 3 tricks at a time. So you have a total of 7 PCs, NPCs doing tricks all at the same time.
Okay.
In the build-up or the finale, you can have someone co-star. It uses up their reaction, and you essentially aid them, which is a whole set of rules in Pathfinder where you roll against the DC for their check and try to set them up to look even better by giving them bonuses to their rolls.
I want to point out, because we've mentioned this in the past when we talk about 5th edition, that it's a combat oriented system, because while there are rules and mechanics and numbers for the environment, for the exploration pillar, there's very little for the role-playing pillar outside of spells like friends and charming and whatnot, right? So you're rolling opposing skill checks and then moving the fuck on. There's not a whole lot of gamification or codified rules. This is a perfect example of codified rules for a role-playing scenario, and it's not something we're used to seeing. That's why it feels so weird and foreign to people playing 5th edition, right? So even 4th edition and 3.5 had a couple of little things like this, but they were still usually based around combat, sometimes exploration, right? So it's cool to see something like this for role playing. I'm excited.
Well, and don't get me wrong, Pathfinder 2nd edition is largely balanced around combat. It is also combat oriented, but it also has those rules for role playing and exploration. Are they significantly less than the combat rules? Yes, but they're there.
Yeah, and that's just it with the way that we want to game in tabletop role-playing games. We tend, if the moment it's a tabletop role-playing game, chances are good it's combat oriented, right? It's going to be focused on that. If we want to world build or do exploration or do role-playing and stuff, we end up playing certain collectible card games or board games or other things, right? Tabletop role-playing games absolutely can be. Call of Cthulhu is exploratory. That's the whole thing. Do not get into combat. But half of the rules are combat based, right? So we very much lean in that direction. It's nice to see other systems and how they handle the other pillars, which is fun. I'm like I say, I'm excited about this. So I will absolutely steal this kind of shit for my own carnivals and games. So the other thing to point out is that there are different levels of tricks with increasing DCs attached to them, right?
Yes, since you add your level to your proficiency modifier, it uses just the standard DC for your level, which gets higher and higher up the higher level you are. But it's going to be the same average of rolling a d20 to make it as it was from levels 1 to 20. I mean, of course, it'll get easier if you're like, hey, this skill that I use for my performance, I'm going to level up more so I get higher bonuses in. You'll have an easier time getting that roll going.
Fair enough. I also noticed that you've got to burn one of. Do you get this as a bonus feat, or do you have to burn one of your feats to get the advanced circus trick?
So that would be a separate feat that you can take. I don't know what category it is off the top of my head, but yes, you would have to take one of your other feats to take that feat.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of the cost of getting into this, which makes it a general feat. I think it says in the book.
Okay. Yep, general feat, that's its own category.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
you get feats every single level. It's how you design your character and how you want to play them.
The idea here is that every trick has traits. We're going to talk about, there's so many different rules here. So we've got the feat that allows you to do tricks. Each trick has a trait, and the traits give you skills. So let me explain really quickly for the listeners, and correct me when I get this wrong. You take the feat, and that allows your character to put on or to become a part of the act, essentially. So, no?
So starting this campaign off, every player character has a trick. You design your trick. You pick one skill, attack roll, or saving throw that you want to be your dice roll for that trick. And then you get to add a trait. If you take that feat, it just opens up the door and allows you to add more skill checks and more traits. But you don't have to take the feat if you don't want it. It just opens up the door and gives you more options if you don't want that -5 or that -10.
Gotcha. Okay. And there are a bunch of different traits here, right? So different traits are things they're like skills, but there comes with a little bit of an explanation with each one. So you get access to agile, animal, fire, and water style traits. You learn more as you hire more NPC performers, and you can kind of expand your horizons a little bit. And some of these traits give a +1 to a specific skill when you do the trick.
And it tells you what skill the trait gives the +1 to.
Yeah, and some tricks have mandatory traits due to the nature of them.
Yeah, like one of the NPCs, she dunks herself in a tank of water and picks the locks on her handcuffs. Since she's underwater, she'll have to do a fortitude save to hold her breath, and that comes with the injury trait. If she critically fails, she might not be able to perform next time.
Yeah, so let's jump into the traits because there's a decent list of them. So I'm gonna just rattle these off quickly. There's aerial, so your trick includes flight of some kind, either mundane or magical, and it gives you a +1 to your acrobatics check when you have an aerial or a flight aspect to the trick. If you have an air trait, it means that you're manipulating air or wind in some way, and it gives you a +1 to survival. If you've got alchemical, that means that you're using a single use alchemical object, and you gain a +1 on whatever the trick check is. It doesn't matter. It's just any trick check gets a +1 because you got this prop. Agile means that you're using agile tricks multiple times. It incurs only a -4 or -8, right? Instead of the -5, -10. So it encourages you to keep doing the agile trick over and over and over again. If you've got the animal trait, it includes animals somehow and gives you a +1 to your nature checks. If you have an audience trait, it means that you're dealing with audience participation. I'm thinking like a carnival barker or a stand-up comedian, right? And it gives you a +1 to society. If there's a beast trait, that means that this trick includes magical beasts. And there is a difference between animals and magical beasts, right? So in Dungeons and Dragons, we've got to keep an eye on that because in D&D, beasts are just animals. right? And monstrosities are the magical beasts. So, but that gives you a +1 to Arcana. If you have the dance trait, then it includes dancing or choreography. And that one was a little bit stranger. So you get a circumstance bonus to trick checks gained from performers using their co-star reaction. So depending on how well they do, you will get bonuses, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, none of my players or the NPCs use the dance trait, so I don't really know fully how it functions because I don't need to.
What does it say here? For example, if 2 other PCs successfully co-star with their ally and have the master proficiency rank in that trick check, so I'm assuming it's one of the higher ranks, right? Yeah.
Yep, it's trained expert master legendary, so that's pretty far up there to get master.
Okay, then then their total circumstance bonus granted from the co-star reaction is +6 rather than +3. So normally you get a +3 if you do. Okay, interesting. For Earth, if you use mud, earth, or stone, you get +1 to occultism. There's emotion. By using alchemy or magic, you can reduce the excitement and anticipation down to 0.
Which is if you're trying to meet those two for your critical success of a show,
Yeah,
that's going to come in handy.
yeah, that's huge. So you're essentially gassing the audience, which is hilarious. Fire clearly involves anything with fire, but also smoke or pyrotechnics. That one gives a +1 to intimidation, which I thought was really neat. And as someone that has been to the Backdraft show or I guess experience at the old Universal Studios in LA, like when that room lights up, when it blows up around you, feel the heat. Yeah, the intimidation factor is real. So that's fun. The next one is injury. If you or an NPC roll a saving throw, the trick automatically adds an injury trait due to danger. If you critically fail, you roll a DC 15 standard check, and you are injured and can no longer do tricks in the show if you critically fail. On top of that, you have to pass a DC 15 check on the following show to see if you've recovered enough to participate.
And the fun part about this, it's specifically a flat 15 DC, which in Pathfinder terms means no pluses, no minuses. You roll that D20 and you need to beat 15 in order to not get seriously injured and perform again.
And yeah, so you have a 25% chance of being able to do it, a little bit more than, I guess, a 30% chance. However, this only lasts for 2 shows. Right. And then after that, you're back up on your feet again. So it's not crippling.
Well, in book 1 here, there's only 1 circus performance that it has you do.
Ooh, so
yeah.
It is crippling. Well, there you go.
I gave my my players the option, hey, if y'all want to do another circus, let's do it. It's fun.
Well, I wonder, I think that, like, look, as someone who was a freaking clown, we had a freak show that was there, and I'll talk about them in a little bit. But they did multiple shows every night. So I think the idea is if you get injured on the first show of the evening, you might not be able to do the second show that evening.
This book does include its own sideshow. There aren't any rules for the sideshow, just the main big top performers.
Okay. The injury thing, so it's any save. And do we still just have the 3 saves in Pathfinder?
Yeah,
Fortitude,
they're
Reflex,
named
and Will?
different. Yeah, it's Fortitude, Reflex, and Will. So I guess it's not named different.
It's very different 5th edition, but it's the same as it was in 1st edition Pathfinder and 3.5.
Yeah, so it's only Constitution, Dexterity, and Wisdom.
Yeah, that hasn't changed. Cool. The magical trait means if you use magic on a success, you add additional excitement equal to the expended spell slot, which means that you have to use 1 spell slot, but you can choose what level you want to do it. So you can, if there's a magical component, you can actually boost up your excitement roll quite a bit.
I mean, the circus is going to perform at the end of the day anyway. If you have spell slots, let's burn them.
Absolutely. Although me as a dungeon master would absolutely have encounters pop up after as everybody's leaving and shit, right?
What? So. That certainly didn't happen in this first book. No way.
The musical trait means that you are involving music somehow. You get a +1 to performance. There's the plant trait, which is interesting. If you use plants or fungi in any way, then you get a +1 to nature, which was cool. I'm trying to think like you're putting your head inside a giant Venus flytrap. Like what's the plant?
Good question. I don't know. The only thing I can think of is one of the new classes that they released is the kineticist. They have all the different elements, but they also added metal and wood.
Hmm.
So if I wanted to be a wood kineticist and I'm doing weird things with trees,
Yeah. Or you just you just like look at these smoke rings I can blow from my pipe. Does that count as plant? So
I don't think I'd give that plant.
no.
I don't think you're rolling nature to blow smoke rings. I think that'd be performance, personally.
There's prop trait as well, which uses a mundane prop or a stage setup like a springboard or a pool of water or something, right? So
A
that gets
puppet show.
yeah, it's a crafting +1. Team trait just includes more than one person, and the time trait includes time kerfuckery. So you actually get to make the trick for free a second time, and you get -5, -5 on the third or fourth uses. So after that, it doesn't hurt quite as badly to try. And then you have the final one is the water trait, which essentially just uses water as a primary feature of the trick and gives you a +1 to athletics. So I assume that this is not just like a squirting flower, but more of you within a pool of water if it's going to be athletics.
Yep, that NPC who dunks herself in water, she has the water trait.
Yep, there we go. So let's talk about the examples that we get from the book. There's Axel's amazing aviary, which is an animal trait. So that produces birds that do tricks from underneath his cape, and gives him a +7 to nature checks. There's the dwarven throwers, which has the team trait. They're aerial tumblers. They don't actually fly. So I assume based on the art that you're firing them out of a cannon, but it doesn't say cannon anywhere.
It does say in the description that they shape themselves into a living ballista and launch themselves through the air.
Oh,
So they
well, there you
throw each.
go. So they've
They're the
got
dwarven throwers. They throw each other.
nobody throws a dwarf. So they've got acrobatics +7, athletics +10. There's Elysia and Mr. Tickles. I almost don't want to describe that and just let people imagine, but this is an animal trait because Mr. Tickles is a 16-foot anaconda, but there are other vipers and snakes and stuff in the show as well. +7 to intimidation, +7 to nature. So even though there's not fire involved in this, you're still getting the imitation
Oh yeah.
bonus, right? So
Well, she doesn't get the bonus to intimidation. She only gets the bonus to her nature rolls since she has the animal check, the animal trait.
oh, so then why does it list
I don't know, man.
intimidation? No, I think you have to do the 2 checks on this, right?
I will be honest. I just pick when I roll because you have your 3 actions, and can do what you want with it.
So the next one is the Flamboni sisters, and this is they've got fire, injury, and team. So fire because they're juggling, fire sticks essentially. It's 2 sisters, which is why it's a team as well. But because fire is involved, the nature of it means that they might have to make fortitude saves against the fire. So injury tag is on it as well.
I
What's
just make
interesting
them
here
roll
is
that
that
if they fail.
yeah, what's interesting is that the check listed here is deception +7, but fire should have a intimidation.
Well, it's not that the traits say what you have to roll. It gives you what you get a bonus to if you do that. You can have fire with deception, but you're not going to get that +1 for the fire trait.
No, that doesn't I was under the impression it automatically pushes that onto the
No, only if it has the little asterisk by it. So team and injury are the only 2 that automatically get added. I know, man, there's a lot of rules. It gets confusing.
those are the ones that are compulsory. Those are the ones that absolutely have to be
Yes.
added.
But if you want to roll deception with fire, you're more than welcome to. But fire gives a +1 bonus to intimidation. So if you roll intimidation with fire, you get a +1. If you roll deception with fire, you do not.
But does she get the +7 to it then? Is that what the check is?
Yes, she does get the +7, but she doesn't have they don't get that +1 for the fire trait if they used intimidation.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's confusing. I'm gonna be honest. I just do what I want to do because it's my game.
We get the Featherfall 5, which are some tightrope acrobatics. It's all agile and team based, right? As they bounce around on tightrope way up in the sky. Acrobatics +8, athletics +6. And then there's the one that you spoke about, Mordain the Magician, who is all about injury in water and escaping from a water tank while manacled. It's very interesting the way that we look at these mechanics. I would absolutely, because they've got the trait listed on them, but it's different than the checks that they get. I get the impression that the list of traits that we got before, that all have a +1 to this and a +1 to that, means that it encourages you to use these different traits, or the different skills, but you don't have to use the skills. You can use whatever you want.
Correct, yes. I could do an attack roll with the fire trait because I don't know, throwing flaming daggers. But I don't get any bonuses for that, for the attack roll.
What's interesting is that they're giving additional bonuses, right? So like it's +7 to deception for the Flamboni sisters. Where's that +7 coming from, right? Like that seems to be a huge bonus.
Well, it's actually not that far-fetched to have a +7 as a level 1 character. That's typically, I think you can get as high as a +8 for level 1. So +7's not too far out to get. Yeah, you just have to, it's essentially what the character's built for. Now, the fact that the Dwarven Throwers get a +10 to acrobatics is, no, to +10 to athletics is very impressive for a level 1 character.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like, hey, look, I want to be the character that lies through my teeth, but then my circus performance, I'm going to involve fire, you're going to be rolling pretty high against your DC 15 with like a +8 or 9.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So, like, just for context for people as well, in case they haven't put it together yet, on your character sheet, you will have bonuses in all of these skills as well. So you're adding that +1. It's not like in D&D where you've got really low skills. You've got, like you say, a +7, a +8, and you may be adding a +1 or another +7 or 8, depending on, you know, the nature of the skill as well. So
yeah, Pathfinder makes it really easy to be really good at the things you want to be really good at, but then you're gonna suck at everything else.
Yeah, I feel that you could have a 2-person party in D&D and still be able to cover most of the skills, or at least not suffer too much. If you desperately wanted to, you could throw in an NPC and round out all of the skills and saves. However, in Pathfinder, you become specialists. There are some things you will just suck at, so don't do them, right?
Now, one of my players is a rogue, and he is literally trained in 14 skills. There are 15 options.
And yeah, and that's the other thing too, for the way that rogues are built. They're very different. They're very intelligence based in Pathfinder, as opposed to or they were in 3.5 anyway, because your skills were based on your intelligence.
There are essentially subclasses, in quotey fingers, for the rogue in Pathfinder that kind of lets you choose what you want to base off of. My player did pick the one that lets you base it off intelligence.
Cool. All right, so let's look at what different circus acts there are and what we can glean from what D&D brings to the table. So I went digging through the D&D source material just to find out what options there are for circuses and carnival performers, and there's 3 different circuses that we get. There's the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, clearly the Witchlight Carnival. There's the Carnival from the Shadowfell. You can read about that in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. And then there's the Cult of Rakdos from Ravnica. So, and that one is an evil carnival. So I'm going to leave that to end. We'll just breeze by it really quickly because you've already escaped the evil carnival, right? So
yeah, we'll fight them later. It's fine.
So when you are dealing with the Witchlight, there are a couple of backgrounds you can get, but they're all like Fey based, except for one, which lets you just be a Witchlight hand. And you get automatic bonuses to performance and sleight of hand, and you get the disguise kit or a musical instrument, and you get an extra language. I like the extra language because that kind of hails back to the idea of the Russian circus performers that would come over to America back at the turn of the 20th century and kind of make their wares. Like, I like the idea that you are coming from Eastern Europe or from Asia, and So you've got a different custom, a different society that you've been living with, a different culture, and you're bringing it over, because a lot of carnivals and circuses were roving. They picked people up, right? And they were homes for people that couldn't really make it anywhere else. So I like that. The Disguise Kit or musical instrument is just a 5th edition flavor and bullshit, but performance and sleight of hand make a lot of sense, right? You do get kinds of carnival connections, though, which I thought were really interesting for inspiring different NPCs. So let me go through the D8 list here really, really quickly. There might be something here that sparks some inspiration. Number one is an old cantankerous witchlight hand. So someone who supports the performances, but is, old and gnarled and man, I worked for a haunted event, but I also worked during the regular summer seasons, late spring and early summer, where we had an amusement park. But when we've got the Pacific National Exhibition that comes and inhabits that area, the carnies come, and there are far more games. Those carnies, holy shit. And I know that it's probably not the most PC thing to say, but I've had experiences, and I know that not every carnival is like this, but I've had experiences with, like, there was a guy with a literal hole through his hand that just didn't heal right. And between, like, that flap of skin between your forefinger and thumb, he just had a hole. He could put his pinky finger through it because he drilled through his hand one time and it never healed right. He didn't want to go to the hospital because God knows why. He also had a whole lot of clearly DIY tattoos all over his face. So, like, there were some characters, and some of them were lifers. There was one woman, she must have been 150, and but like the fastest tongue. She had no issue whatsoever putting you in your fucking place. And so, like, I love her. The old cantankerous witchlight hand rings very true to me.
I mean, if you're 150, I expect you to put me in my place.
Yeah, like, she walked around with a cane, but she carried it. She didn't. I never saw her use it, and I think it was just for hitting people.
Yep,
so,
it's her switch.
Yeah, there was a young impressional witchlight hand as a second one, which I mean is the exact opposite, but that's very much something I saw as well, because we would have the people that we would hire into the haunted house, or the new hires, the young teenagers working the rides at the games or whatnot, but they would be smoking. And so in the smoke tent, you would watch them, like, scared as fuck of the older carnies that were in there as well. And, like, it was neat to watch. I was in my late 20s, early 30s at this point, and had seen some shit myself. So, like, I was able to kind of walk both worlds a little bit. So it was neat to see them have the different perspectives. But number 3 is just a performer, such as an acrobatic clown or musician. So I'm not really getting anything from that. But number 4 is a retired performer, someone that's stuck around in the crowd and whatnot. Maybe they used to do one job and now they're doing something else, like being a carnival barker, right? They used to do something like involving fire, and now they are completely bald and the hair won't grow back. Right.
Yeah, the leader of the sideshow in this book, the professor, was a fire swallower, and he don't talk too well anymore. Old raspy voice from being burned so many times, so he's kind of quiet. But yeah,
look, my throat has been thrashed from years of chain smoking back in my carnival days. So, like, I feel that. You have the seasoned animal trainer. One of the ones, or a couple of things that I really liked was when they stepped outside the basic idea of it being a human. An old blink dog is one of them, right? Having a semi-intelligent, like, monstrous creature, that's a lot of fun. The next one is a cheery sprite. Clearly Faye lines up perfectly with carnivals. And I mean, that's the whole Witchlight book, right? But I think that's something to think about. We saw, like, the dwarven throwers and whatnot, but we didn't get a whole lot. Like, is everybody else, I think the Flamboni sisters have, like, elven ears, but everybody else is just a human. We're not getting a whole lot of halflings and Goliaths and any of that stuff, right? So we should really start thinking about fleshing it out with kind of the less common ancestries or playable races in D&D speak. And then the last one is a harmless magical wisp of light that has no stat block. It has a flying speed of 30 feet. It can hover and it sheds bright light in a 5-foot radius and dim light for an additional 5 feet. And it just wanders through the carnival. Yep.
I love it. I love it.
I think that would be just a really interesting thing to like, this is a creature they think it showed up one day and it likes to perform with this kind of trick, right? And so sometimes when it shows up, you get a team trait to it, like it can be something wild like that.
I'm going to have this little ball of light and the only thing it says is, hey, listen.
No, okay, no. As someone who has not played a whole lot of video games, I have played that and it needs to just not. It just
See, fortunately, it would go completely over all of my players' heads, so I could do it and they'd be none the wiser.
There are going to be a select few listeners who just twitched. So, when we move over to the carnival from the Shadowfell and Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, the whole deal of this carnival is it's one of the only ways to travel between the other domains. So if you can join up with the carnival, you can actually travel to one of the other little pocket dimensions within the Shadowfell. And it is a prison. It is a punishing thing for one Dark Lord there. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the fact that it gave us 6 NPCs, and it gave us a little bit more depth to them. So let me read it out directly. There's Tyndall the Barker. Tyndall, the carnival's cynical, fast-talking lead barker, is a mage and uses a mage stat block. And he tours the grounds with visitors. At the last stop, he reveals his only uniqueness is the amazing, his own uniqueness as the amazing soulless man. He casts no reflection and claims to lack a soul. There's Alti the Werehair, who is a quick-tongued rapper and dancer. You use a were-rat stat block for this, but he's just a were-rabbit. But he's a bombastic performer who turns into a rabbit on nights of the full moon. There's Amelia the Vampire, who is a cheery acrobat, aided in her performance by a pair of leathery wings that allow her to fly. Before stepping on stage, she powders her face, affects a somber accent, and pretends to be undead. She's not actually a vampire. She's just a person with fake wings.
I love it. I love it. Ooh,
there's Charlotte the Fire Eater. This is a juggling daredevil with a dizzying array of flaming knives and other deadly objects. She claims that her blood is flammable and that she's burned the hair off 18 hecklers. And then there's the Organ Grinder, who is a somber clown grinding an ornate barrel organ. This speaks to me directly. An attendant group of mischievous, half-trained, not quite identifiable animals all dance to his music. The clown never speaks, but allows visitors to guess the animal's nature for a copper piece. So the last one is Celessa the Snake, a dancer and animal tamer. And Celessa is actually a druid who performs with a collection of rare serpents. She claims she was born a snake and magically transformed into an elf.
I love that. I love that.
So as you can see, there are a lot of really interesting, compared to the 6 NPCs offered in the Pathfinder book, these ones are far more outlandish, right? Let me talk for just a moment here about the Cult of Rakdos.
Perfect.
There's not a whole lot of inspiration to grab because, like I say, it's an evil cult. It's an evil carnival, right? But it does give us things like the Spike Wheel Acrobat, which is a guy who is you seen the Vitruvian Man, the Da Vinci's, the
Yeah.
Right? It's that only in a giant iron wheel with spikes on the outside, and he's like an acrobat that rolls around in that thing all the time.
I love it. I love it.
There's the lampooning satirist, so the guy that warms up the audience by heckling them. There's the fire juggler, a marionette puppeteer, something called a pain artist. We don't need to go too far into. Something called a noise musician, which I mean, I guess just he's a jazz player.
Jazz is my favorite to play.
I was in a jazz band when I was younger, but I have to admit that some of the more eclectic jazz is I have trouble following along with.
Yep, I saw a jazz show where it was a lot of weird mouth noises.
I only have inappropriate things to say, so I'm going to move right along.
Yep.
Nightmare clown, but also a master of ceremonies as well, right? So having someone that would be an announcer. So there are a few things that think about on that list, interesting bits and pieces, but honestly, I like to look at the different roles in a circus as well, right? I went kind of deep into my personal experiences here, and then tried to round it out because as much as I was at I worked in an amusement park, we definitely worked with the carnies, and we were the performers that were out there, usually haunted, as I've spoken about before, but I was a clown. My house, the haunted house that I was a part of, was circus themed. And so it was it's a little bit, I'm adjacent to a actual carnival here. And I want to point out that yes, there are jesters and clowns. Yes, there are knife throwers. We've talked about fire eaters, but there's also sword swallowers as well. We haven't mentioned stilt walkers yet. There are sleight of hand magicians, right, that are not actually using magic, but just where'd the bird come from? Look at all the handkerchiefs. Here's a card trick. Ventriloquists. There are unicyclists, and we've mentioned jugglers and puppeteers, but those are major factors. You juggle different things. There's a difference between a marionette show and a Punch and Judy kind of puppet show as well, right? We've mentioned master of ceremonies and carnival barkers as well, and satirists, but having those big personalities to use their voice to warm up the crowd before the acts of physical or daring or whatever go off as well, right? You need kind of that Penn and Teller personality, right? So trapeze artists, talked about lion tamers. This is D&D, so lion is the beginning of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
So
no, one of my players, his trick, he has a crocodile animal companion.
there you go. There you go. But the other things, there are a couple of shows as well. Okay, so total sidebar. I'm not going to throw this guy under the bus. I went and saw a show as an audience member at the Pacific National Exhibition. We call it the PNE. So I went to the PNE with Mieke one time, and we went and saw a man who claimed to be a hypnotist and a mentalist. And it was the most bullshit show that I have ever seen. It was so bad. And this guy was clearly on some sort of substance 90% of the time, but not during the show, and was strung out as all hell. Like, it was weird and it was rough, but it's worth mentioning that hypnotists and psychics and whatnot are absolutely shows that could be there, especially if you drop them inside an anti-magic field and have them get all the answers right anyway, right? So it's clearly not magic, right? That could be something that would be fun or interesting. And I don't know how you would approach this, considering how weird and magnificent everything already is in medieval fantasy, but a freak show is absolutely like a sideshow that you could lean into.
Yeah, like I did say before, there is the sideshow that they include in here, but it's the sideshow of everyday marvels. So they're all like regular people, but get talked up like they're not regular people.
Nice.
My players really hated one of them is the unjoined twins. They're identical twin sisters who have lived parallel lives. And I tell you, my players were rolling their eyes.
Yeah.
Because, of
I
course,
bet.
they're unjoined twins by technicality.
Yeah. Like the giant with dwarfism, and it's just a man. Right.
Yeah, one of them's the bearded man who's good at impressions.
So I would be really, really careful about a freak show or sideshow. Like, you got to be aware of your players. If anybody listening is going to throw that in there, you don't know what sort of family history people have with I don't even, like, our language has changed so much. 40 years ago you'd have said deformities, and now it's conditions, and like, you've got to be aware of how the language has changed. A lot of circus and carnival language is very old-timey still, right? Especially when we talk about things like freak shows and circus acts and whatnot. So you've got to be careful.
Well, and fortunately for me, my players are twin brothers, so they have the same upbringing, and I'm dating one of them.
Yeah.
So I have the upper hand of I do know my players very well.
Yeah, that's fair. The average person listening, though, or especially if you're going to do anything online with
Oh,
people,
no, I would not touch this online.
Yeah, I would steer clear of that. But you can replace it with one of the best things that I have ever seen at an amusement park or carnival or circus, and that is a human demolition derby. I'm going to do a quick little shout out to the Monsters of Schlock, because Orbo, or not Orbo, Orbax and Sweet Pepper are brothers, and they put themselves through incredible feats of human daring and intense pain. For your amusement, they will do things like staple playing cards to their faces. They will do like a card trick, and then is this your card, and staple it to the other brother's face, and the audience says, no, that's not it. He goes, oh, then is it this? And staples another one. And like, it's that shit. Like, I have watched them do chainsaw tricks. I've watched them do nail gun tricks. They and like, you will see blood. It is wild what they are willing to do for each other, especially because Orbax is I think professor of physics at a university as his day job. And they know enough about human anatomy to know where the soft tissue bits are and how to, breathe your way through the minor pain and that kind of stuff. So like, they're doing bodily harm, but it's not as fantastical as you're used to seeing. I love the idea of you having a troll who is up there lopping his own limbs off because, he'll regrow them.
It'll just grow back. Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's good. That is good.
So there are some interesting shows that you can throw together when you realize that your fire eater might be actually eating tiny or diminutive sized fire elementals that then crawl out of his nostrils later, right? Like, we can go absolutely wild with circus performers when we start to think about the D&D counterparts, right? I love the Aarakocra that has been plucked, right, and but is still going to be a trapeze artist, right, even though the wings aren't going to work. So,
oh geez, you said an Aarakocra who's been plucked, and it put the worst image in my brain.
Plucked with a P.
Plucked. Yeah, that's what I tried to say. I guess I didn't enunciate well.
So let's talk for a moment about the wants and needs for you. What archetypes you want to play? Not the archetypes of Pathfinder, but like generally speaking, archetypes or tropes that you want to use in your campaign. Or are there any ancestries in particular that you want to highlight as well?
Yeah, you're right. What, 6 of them out of 6, 4 of them in the book are all humans. Let's throw some weird stuff in. I mean, one of my players is as we call it here in Pathfinder, a Gripply, or also known as a Grung.
Yeah.
So he's a frog.
Interestingly, Gripplies are in D&D. They're a different thing.
Oh.
Yeah, we just don't get them as playable races in 5th edition. But Gripply are absolutely things from
there's nothing weird in here. It's all humans. I, as a player, I like to play small-sized ancestries. So, your goblins, your halflings, your gnomes, that kind of stuff. None of that in here yet.
And you'd think gnomes would be there because gnomes are just essentially treasure trolls with delusions of grandeur in Pathfinder, if I remember correctly.
I don't really know. I didn't go too far in the lore. I'm still new at this. I just started playing Pathfinder this year, so.
Gnomes are just far more colorful. They lean more fey than they do in D&D traditionally. So
yeah.
But yeah, what I'm trying to, let me see if I can pull up right now. The good news about recording online is we have the internet right here.
I know, right?
Pathfinder and
except I have a loud computer. Archives of Nethys will be where you want to go. It's the official free rules.
Yeah, that was the number one thing that popped up. Okay, we have what are
one of the rare ancestries I think would be fun to throw in is a skeleton.
Oh yeah, you can play a bunch of weird shit in this, right?
Yeah.
You can play a gnoll, you can play a kitsune. What is a fetchling?
A fetchling, they're weird kind of bird people, but also not bird people. Since no ancestry in Pathfinder starts with flight.
But they're like people with bird features.
I think. Actually, no, my bad. Fletchling is not that.
No.
They are the ones with the shadow plane influence.
Right, okay. It's probably Tengu.
Tengu is your Kenku.
Okay, there's Venara, which are monkey-like humanoids. We've got Nagaji, which are serpentine. That makes sense. Leshy, which are guardians and emissaries of the environment.
They're all plants. The free RPG day adventures for Pathfinder, you play as Leshies. It's so much fun.
What is Azarketi?
They are they the spider people?
No, aquatic humanoids from the inner sea.
Oh, they're like your sea elves.
Okay. And then rare one. Oh, yeah. God, there's a lot of these androids is here. Automaton. And there's a flesh warp. There's a lot of stuff. I would be honestly looking to go to these rare ancestries first because they're going to be ones that will pop up at a carnival because they're not going to fit into your regular society.
I'm running a DM PC for this campaign since the module's written for 4 PCs and I have 2.
Yeah.
So I figured let's throw in a third to make it closer. My character's a poppet. I am a living 3-foot tall teddy bear. And just because I can, my teddy bear walks around on roller skates. He just skates everywhere.
Now, I need to know the attitude of this poppet.
Since I'm also doing the dual class, I'm an air kineticist, which is why I just kind of float around on skates. And I'm also a alchemist, so I'm the doctor. So I'm very much just like, we'll make it through, guys. I'll make sure of it.
I was just making sure you weren't a Care Bear or Ted.
No, I very specifically did not want to do either of them.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm the pharmacist. I'm not a doctor. I'm an alchemist, so I'm the pharmacist.
We were playing, sidebar, speaking of pharmacists, we were playing Call of Cthulhu before our campaign kind of fizzled. I should really do an episode about that. But we were playing and Sean joined the group later on and he showed up as a pharmacist, but he was a pharmacist in like the 1920s, so he was just handing out opium, and he was just a drug dealer, a government-sponsored drug dealer, and with his bag of pills. And his whole point was, I am going to poison or pop up everybody around. So
I love it. Yep, that's kind of how my character goes, but he's a teddy bear on roller skates.
Cool. So let's pick. Is there anything that you desperately want to play before we jump into any specific one?
Not particularly, because especially the commons, they're common. If something happens to my poppet, I will probably end up as a goblin because I love goblins. So.
Okay. And we're looking to make NPCs, not DMPCs, right?
Correct. I want NPCs, possible even like circus performers, because the book does not give me a lot to go off of for the actual performers themselves.
Do you have any preferences on alignments, genders, ages, anything like that?
Not really. Alignment isn't something that I lean heavily in as a DM. I think alignment inherently works better retroactively, to apply the alignment to the actions that you take, not I'm a lawful good character, so I have to do this. I don't like that.
Okay. And are there any skills or traits or tricks that you're like, this is clearly missing from the campaign?
There's no attack rolls. No one does any attacks on anything.
Okay, we can change that. Change that. So, how many NPCs do we want to build?
Totally up to you. I mean, each book gives 6. If we do 2, 3, that is perfect for me.
So, let's jump on to 3 NPCs. Give me 1 second to pull up my notes. All right.
Also take notes, but I don't think I'm going to hit needing more performers until after this airs.
So, when it comes to building the NPCs, there are going to be essentially 9 things that I want to focus on. We don't have to flesh out a full character, right? We should just go through kind of what the basics are that we're going to need to be able to run through a session. And if the players become more interested, then of course you flesh it out from there. So we're going to do really basic NPC generation. Now, normally what I do is I immediately start off with what role are they playing when the party interacts with them, and it usually comes down to what job they have. So clearly this is going to be what act do they fulfill, right? What is the trick that they want to do?
Yeah, and I will figure out all of the numbers later. That is not something I want to try to drag you or the listeners into.
Oh yeah. We're going to sort out the history and lore, and then you can plug the numbers in later. But is there? I've talked a lot about Witchlight hands, old and young, retired performers, fey creatures, even that harmless little light. I talked about the rapper and dancer who was a werehair, the vampire that's not actually a vampire, the organ grinder with all the weird little creatures around them, spike wheel acrobats, lampooning satirists, marionette puppeteers, noise musicians, stilt walkers, sleight of hand magicians, like ventriloquists, cyclists, unicyclists, psychics, puppeteers, trapeze artists, animal tamers, contortionists. Anything jump out at you as something that you really want to jump into? Pick one.
Yeah, I mean, oh boy, I think I do want something that does more of an attack for sure. I really liked the idea of throwing in like the hypnotist or something like that. And then maybe even like a card magician.
Let's do a hypnotist. We're gonna build all three at the same time and see what we land on. All right.
Perfect.
So I'm gonna work on this. So we got a hypnotist, a card magician, and you wanted something with an attack. Now, do you want it to be like a knife thrower?
Sure.
Is there anything besides knives that we can throw that's going to be more interesting?
There are a lot of weapons that you can throw. We can do axes if we want, of course. Javelins, these are just off the top of my head. Heck, I can pull up all the thrown weapons that Pathfinder gives us, and it is a lot.
That's another thing that Pathfinder does very differently than D&D. I have actually stolen from Pathfinder when I give out specific weapons and unique items to my players, because short sword doesn't begin to fucking cover it.
No.
Right.
No, I just pulled up the page online for just base weapons. These are your mundane, nothing special. There's 304.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I love it. So is there anything that you see there that they can throw?
Here, let me apply the thrown trait. And I want table view. Give me my table view.
You know, it would be fucking rad is something that shouldn't be thrown, but is. Bear with me. What if you had a giant that was throwing lances?
I love it. I love it. Just like it's a spear or a javelin, just throw a lance.
Yeah. And you've got that person standing on the target like you would with a knife thrower, and the lances are just like shaving the hair off the top of their head, or like pinning their clothes to the wall, but not actually hitting them.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. I don't think this would be a good one for audience participation because we're not going to kill an audience member.
I mean,
You live a little, right?
But you're definitely going to have injury as a part of this one.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, what are all of the different traits?
There are a lot. We could do like agile if we want to make it so they throw a lot.
Well, clearly prop, I think, is the
prop. Yeah, I think that would go well. I'm planning on introducing these NPCs around 4th level, so about 2 rolls, 2 to 3 traits per, more or less as we feel, because when you're the DM, you do what you want to do.
I think this is team because you're throwing it at somebody as well.
Mm-hmm.
And agile, I think, makes sense. So that's like 4 different traits.
Team and injury are mandatory traits. So
yeah. Would we make this choreography like he does a dance and is throwing lances as he does it?
Okay, I can get into that.
So we'll have a dance component here.
Make him, do his weird little not pole dance on a lance before he throws it.
Yeah. Weird, but I love it.
It's the circus.
The card magician is going to use props.
For sure.
Is going to, was there a sleight of hand one?
I don't think there is actually a sleight of hand one. Looking through it, I don't see one.
I don't see anything that's like thievery directly.
Now, do we want to do audience since, is this your card?
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can, if I can be honest, we should have an anti-magic field pop up. Be like, look, none of this happens. Try to cast your spells, nothing. But it doesn't actually like include him. So he is doing magic. But it's like really like it's small little like pyrotechnics and little like puff of smoke kind of stuff. So you would assume that it's just fantastical prop, but it's actually magic, like low level magic.
Yeah, get a good prestidigitation going.
So we'll put magical on there. And then a lot of times magicians have doves up their sleeves or rabbits in their hats, but that
We
doesn't
already
quite
have that
feel
with
right for
Axel.
this. What about emotion?
Emotion magically, well, emotion does want an alchemical or magical to induce emotions. I think that would be better for the hypnotist than the card magician.
Yeah, good call. I also want to put time on the hypnotist as well because I think that's weird.
Yeah, I feel like audience, emotion, and time would be really good for a hypnotist.
Yeah. And not alchemical maybe as well.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm sorry for the card magician I'm looking at.
Oh, okay, yeah. Smoke bombs and the like.
Yeah. So that puts us at 1 second. That puts us at emotion, time, and audience for the hypnotist. The card magician has prop, audience, magical, and alchemical.
Okay,
And the
I feel
lance
like
thrower.
one of magical or alchemical would go well for the
Yeah, I don't think we need magical. I think alchemical will fit. We can put him in an anti-magic field, and alchemical works.
yeah, because alchemy can still make puffs of smoke in anti-magic fields.
Yeah, and then for the lance thrower, we have dance, prop, and agile, but it also comes with team and injury.
Perfect. I like it.
All right, so let's pick 3 ancestries.
All right. What would be fun?
For the hypnotist, is there anyone you can either lean into it and be like, oh, this is the psychic ancestry, like we have Kalishtar, or like the psychics?
I think that'd be hilarious to have a skeleton hypnotist.
Neat. Yeah, I was gonna say, so you can either lean into it or you can do the exact opposite.
I think skeleton kind of leans into it while also not leaning into it. Like, what does this sentient skeleton know that can do this?
I think we chose that the lance thrower is just going to be straight up a giant.
I love it.
Is there a particular kind of giant? Do they have different ones in Pathfinder as well?
Not that I'm completely aware of. I mean, I don't think we have a giant per se to play as, but I'm still kind of new, so I could be wrong. I mean, I could do like a particularly shredded gnoll. I can just add a giant because I can.
Yeah, honestly, I would just use a giant monster stat block and
Yeah.
just have it be like a friendly giant.
Yeah.
So these don't need to be proper ancestries. It's just because they're intelligent creatures. The card magician could be a fucking dragon, right? Like it could be a small dragon that is just like obsessed with cards for some reason. Actually, that's a load of fun. See, there's nothing under my wings, right? Like it could be a load of fun to just have like a wormling, like a 40-year-old dragon.
See, now my counterpoint to that would be I think it would be fun to do like a pixie for that, where the cards are almost as big as they are.
I love it. Instead of like standing on a deck of cards and just running in place to deal them out.
Yes.
Love it. Okay, so we've got skeleton, pixie, and giant. I've got gender is the next thing I normally come up with. Skeleton doesn't need that even really. Like there's no sex or gender.
They can wear a cloak. No one's going to be measuring their hip bones.
Yeah, right. So that would be androgyny, I guess.
Yeah, Pathfinder does a lot into that, where they encourage, are you a guy, a girl? Do you use they, them pronouns?
Yeah.
There's several deities in this game that do that.
It's weird because it's definitely in Dungeons and Dragons, but it is very much hidden. Like you've got to go looking for it. Like the lore on kobolds and even elves have the ability to change gender over time, but under very specific circumstances. And that is a throwaway bit of lore that you do not find. Like that is never the focus of anything, right?
Yeah.
The idea that it never says it out loud, but in the Theros book, which is all Greek themed, there's a lot of characters there. The art is very, very intimate between two men. Like they're two men, like one has their hand on the other one's shoulders, they're staring off into the horizon, or one of them is like fixing the other one's hair and stuff. It's never mentioned in the text, but the art supports it. And so I feel like Wizards of the Coast just won't commit to it because they're trying to hit the broadest audience possible. Right?
Paizo commits to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, points for effort, but do better.
I agree.
Card magician for the pixie. We're talking gender here, or sex, or whatever. So
I'm not sure. It could literally be any option. They could be, let's see, well, what do I have in the book? Let's see. There's a guy, there's a girl, there's a whole team, there's a family, there's 2 sisters and a girl. There is a lack of men in this circus.
All right, let's do a male pixie. And then for the giant, we didn't come up with their assistant.
Oh, yes, the giant assistant.
Who should be a medium-sized creature, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I would say go middle of the road just because the giant is the fantastical part of this, right?
Yeah.
So I would normally go human, but there's so many other humans already that maybe we should pick something along the lines of do you guys have half elves? And
so yes, half elves and half orcs are actually a heritage of humans.
Okay.
With optional rules to allow any ancestry to be half orc or half elf.
Do you want to lean into something like a Tengu or a hobgoblin or?
Yeah, we could do either of those. Hobgoblins in Pathfinder are way more goblin-esque. They're just like tall goblins.
Oh yeah. I'm looking at that now.
Yeah, they're just essentially tall goblins.
I gotta say, I absolutely hate the art for Pathfinder goblins. The ears are just comical to me.
I actually like the regular goblin, but hate the hobgoblin.
Mm-hmm. I want to go medium size because if they're small size, how many lances can you really throw at them, right?
Yeah. Because part of me is like, oh, we could do like an orc. We could also do a serpent person. Although one of my players hates snakes, so that he loves Mr. Tickles, I'll tell you what.
What about doing a rat folk that comes in on the giant's shoulder and like scampers down the arm and stuff?
I love that. They're gonna get so mad if I hit that rat with the lance.
What do you think for the genders for the giant and the rat folk?
Because I mean, obviously you're gonna think, oh, if I want it to be a giant that does his little dance on a lance, I feel like being a woman is problematic.
And it is hilarious if he's like got you know what, he should come out like in like barbarian garb with like the big furs and stuff, but then when it's time to actually do it, he like whips it off and is wearing just like a banana hammock loincloth.
Yes.
And the rat folk that he's throwing at, traditionally the assistant is female, so I feel like that's just a automatic go-to.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that.
Age skeleton is who knows?
Question
mark. The pixie, again, it's Fae. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right. Although it would be absolutely amazing to make them like less than a year old or 10,000 years old.
One extreme to the other.
Yeah. Which one do you think is more fun?
I feel like the skeleton making them thousands of years old and then having the pixie just be like this 3-year-old pixie.
Thousands of years. Time doesn't pass easily inside a crypt, so he has no idea how old the skeleton is.
No idea.
The giant?
I mean, I want to say, mid to late 20s, if that in whatever giant terms that is.
Yeah.
I'm using my giant episode mug, and I don't even know how old giants live to. What kind of fan am I?
Well, it's funny because I don't think they ever mention age of giants in any of the giants episodes because there's not a whole lot about it. The only note that we really get about age at all,
the higher in the ordering you are, the older you are.
It's I think follows just human age progression because they've standardized it for all humanoids in the monster manual except for the ones that are very clearly different: elves, gnomes, dwarves, right? But
yeah,
Aarakocra, orcs, halflings, just like a human.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm thinking mid-20s, someone who's going to be comfortable throwing lances and isn't worried that they're going to throw a hip out.
And for the rat folk,
I can't decide if I want her to be super young or super old, like Grandma Rat.
Grandma Rat is amazing, and I'm writing that down. Grandma Rat. There you
Grandma
go.
Rat getting lances bigger than her thrown at her.
Fucking hilarious. Is there anything about personality traits or alignment that we want to throw out there for any of them?
Um,
Anything?
more of just like personality, general role playing, like alliances and alignment are kind of whatever. Obviously, their alliances are going to be to living in a circus where they're actually accepted as wanted members of a society.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're gonna have both the skeleton and the pixie. They deal with the audience quite a bit, so they've got to have bigger than life. They are presences in the room. They are
Oh yeah.
big, boisterous, and bold, right?
Skeleton I want to play is kind of like creepy and give the audience the what does this skeleton know vibe.
Mm-hmm. And the pixie should be, I just feel hyperactive.
Hyperactive, overconfident.
For the lance thrower, you know what would be cool is if the giant never speaks a word and just dances and it's the rat folk assistant that does all
I
the
was
talking.
literally thinking the same thing.
He's, yeah. Is she a sweet old grandmother type or is she like a craven old crone?
I'm leaning more sweet old grandmother who calls anyone hun or sugar or anything like that. I
Nice.
am quite fond of playing the Southern Belle type characters because I can actually do that accent.
Nice. Now here's the thing that makes my NPCs stand out to my players. So it's a little bit trickier, and this is where we're going to step outside of the roles that they necessarily have here, is the relationships. So who else are they attached to out in the carnival, in the circus? And I mean, our giant and rat folk are clearly a duo, right?
Yeah.
But does that grandmother type have other rat folk that are there? Like, is this
And
a giant among a large group of rat folk that are, I don't know, stagehands even? They don't necessarily
yeah,
need to be performers.
that would be, I think I like that. A couple of rat folk. Grandmother Rat is also going to take in Axel because I'm playing him as a complete nervous wreck who's never performed in the circus before. So she'll be grandma to him.
Okay.
And
Axel,
also,
how many other rat folk? Do you have a die there?
I can get one real quick. I think my dice bag's close by. It's not. Give me 2 seconds. All right, what die size are we picking?
We're gonna figure out how many rat folk are gonna be in the little nest. Do you want to pick? Do we want to say like 2d4? Anywhere between 2 and 8?
2D4? Yeah, that works. I was just looking at the D12 and I'm like, how hilarious would that be if I rolled a 12?
Grab 3d4. Let's find out.
Heck yeah, if I can find them. I bought the bag of holding, so there's literally 10 sets of 7-piece dice in here.
I was looking at that online and I kept thinking to myself, Adam, you don't need more dice sets. I have a
So
rule. I can't buy any more for myself. I can have them gifted to me, but I can't buy them.
I bought it when I first started playing and started DMing because I literally had one, maybe 2 sets of dice. Now run a campaign with 4 players and a DM with one, maybe 2 sets of dice.
That's
No,
rough.
no. So let's see. 3D4, how many rats do we have? I rolled 3 threes.
So 9.
9 of them. I can't believe I rolled 4 3D4 and got the same roll on all 3.
And does the giant just hang out with the rat folk?
Yep, he just follows grandma. Doesn't say a word.
Cool. Our pixie. This is where I want to start leaning out and away from the performer aspect of it. And who is the pixie behind the scenes? Right? Hyperactive and overconfident, but are you liable to see her playing poker with some of the other seasoned, like,
A
veteran
crippling
acts? Or
gambling
is she,
addiction.
sorry?
A crippling gambling addiction.
Something like you could absolutely have like the pixie might be more willing than the others to fall into some sort of debauchery of some sort, to
Yeah,
have a vice.
I think I like the gambling because it leans into the overconfident as well. And then everyone always accuses them of cheating, which sometimes they do. They're a card magician.
Absolutely. Do they have a significant other? Are they there with a sibling? Are they like, is there any other family member, or did they arrive with someone else who's not necessarily a pixie, but maybe another kind of fae? Or are
That's
they a solo?
interesting. I don't think I've decided that. Book 1 takes us into a lot of a group of druids. So I think it would be fun for when my players get through the group of druids that the pixie is there gambling, and they cut a deal with the party or something on getting rid of their gambling debt, and they'll go with them.
All right, I wrote druids in there for the skeleton, who's probably been around for a long time, right? With the circus, are they going to have? This is where I would have the skeleton. Maybe was an old personal friend of the dead ringleader.
Ooh, I do like that. And if I don't do the ringleader, I might do the professor, because those two were homies.
Cool. So like a hypnotist on stage, and then kind of like a world weary old soul, behind the scenes, right?
Whose anecdotes and sayings are so old no one hears them anymore.
I love it. Give me 1 second here to flesh out the notes here. Pardon the pun on the skeleton. All right. And now we need to know what the trick or the trait is. And this is clearly like we know it's a hypnotist, a card magician, but what are we calling it?
Yeah. So you get 3 actions for the circus, much like you do in combat. And you have to perform a trick at least once. There is an option to send in the clowns in case you royally fuck up and need the clowns to distract the audience.
I fucking love it.
Mm-hmm. So I like to plan for at least 2 actions worth of trick to get through it, with an option for a third one if you decide to go for the third one.
Sure, that makes sense. Let's focus. Who do you want to focus on first?
We'll start with the giant.
All right. So my other thing is, you know how they all have like the names of the act, right?
Oh yes, dramatically describing the act.
Yeah, I want to call this one the Giant Lancer Dancer.
Yes, the Giant Lancer Dancer.
And we have dance, prop, and agile. And I think that would we start off with agile as the rat folk comes down and like off the shoulder, and she does a twist and a twirl and all that stuff.
Okay, I think so. Agile's just it's more of it reduces your penalty for doing the same trick. That would be easy for them to do. They come out and they do their little dance.
So we'll start off with the intro dance.
Yeah, because while this is, you have your 3 actions like it's combat, it's not a 6-second round. This is a circus performance. So you have more time to fill in the little details of each action.
Okay, so there'll be a long, well, not long, but like there'll be an intro dance. The two of them, like she comes in on the shoulder and like twirls down his arm, and the two of them like hilariously waltz with each other despite the size differences. And then, she twirls over to the board and slams her body against it as he starts, burying lances in the dirt and dancing around. Like it's a huge intro dance kind of feel. And then we'll jump into the actual throwing of the lances.
Yep, sounds good.
Does she introduce him as he hits random targets, and then at the end of the trick, he actually throws at her? Like, is he knocking down pumpkins and watermelons first, or is he
okay,
just throwing at her?
Maybe. I mean, we could do like a slapstick style thing where they do their little dance and then, he starts lobbing them at her, misses once or twice on purpose, like misses every time, only for her to, get a gotcha as she clotheslines him with a lance or something.
That's cute. That's fun.
Well, I guess clothesline, it'd be more of a tripwire trip
than
a clothesline.
So we've got the intro dance, and then we've got what are we going to call that? Vaudeville routine.
Yeah. Vaudeville slapstick, same thing, right?
Yeah. And then it turns into the actual throwing of the lances.
Yeah.
All right. That is good and easy. Card magician or hypnotist? Which one do we want to do next?
Let's do the card magician. Save the hypnotist for last.
All right. Is this our Trixie Pixie?
The Trixie Pixie. I like it.
Prop, audience, and alchemical. How do we want to start this act?
He's just gonna show up in a smoke cloud to start off. There's just
alchemical
cloud of smoke. Yep. and he's just gonna, as the smoke clears, he's standing in center stage on his table with his deck of cards.
I think it would be fucking hilarious too. Like the puff of smoke is big enough to like engulf a huge creature, and as it dissipates, it's just a small table with the pixie on it.
Yep, like
Yeah.
a tiny little nightstand with a
Yeah,
deck of cards and a pixie standing on it.
I love it. And then audience participation clearly is next, and then we get into the card tricks from there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we don't have to go too far into detail of, is this your card?
No, that's fine. Although I do feel like there's a lot of card tricks like flicking the cards up into the air and catching them as well, even though they're massive. You could have her, or sorry, have him. Sorry, the pixie in my campaign is female, so you could have him use them as like tucking one under each arm and use them as wings to flap, even though the pixie already has wings. And
I
like,
like that.
just the card tricks themselves don't have to be that. Is this your card? I think we should end on that, but there'd be a whole bunch of other stuff as well, right?
Have the audience members shuffle the cards 3 times, throw the whole deck in the air, and they fly it and pick it up all in sequential order.
Yeah, stuff like that. I think that would be really, really fun and really neat, especially if we could have little alchemical things going off, like the every one of the aces when they're grabbed, they explode with glitter and
I love it.
shit like that. So for the hypnotist, and I don't have a name for the skeleton yet, but what does the act look like?
So it will, of course, be audience participation. Now, do I do this more like a mind reader type thing, or more of a like, I'm going to make you do these ridiculous things, hypnotist?
It could it could honestly be both. Having a psychic skeleton that literally does not have a brain is so funny for me.
Yep. It was a good choice. I like it.
This could just be called something like, you don't have to go nuts with a hilarious pun or a rhyming scheme. This could just be like Dr. Bones, right? Or like, and that's all, right? You don't have to go, just like the examples they gave us was like Mr. Tickles, right?
Yeah, I
The
mean, one of them
Flamboni
straight up
sisters.
the Flamboni sisters. That's just their name.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like just Dr. Bones and the whatever, or Dr. Bones's magnificent mind reading or something, right?
Yeah, Dr. Bones' Magnificent Mind Games. Which is funny because my Poppet character, I named him Dr. Pinstripe, so they're going to be feuding on who's the doctor.
Dr. Bones, magnificent. Can I spell? Yeah, I can.
I can't, but spell check exists.
Dr. Bones' magnificent mind manipulations, just for the alliteration.
Sure, yeah.
All right. And then so there's audience, time, and emotion.
Okay. Of course, yeah, audience. I think we get how that's gonna go. You get your audience member or members. Time and manipulation. I think he's gonna be way more magical with actual magic than anything.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how I want to make it go. So I do think I like the idea of kind of making him a little bit more on the actual magical side. Because of course that's how time, I don't know how else you would manipulate time without magic.
We should add magical then to the
Yeah.
traits.
I feel like, let's see, because then we have audience, magical, emotion, and time. That's going to be 4 of them. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. All right. So I think the very first thing that you should do is come out an audience. Like,
Yeah.
Emotion, I think, is another one that very clearly right off the bat would
Yeah.
hit.
And I think that would be good to fit with a lot of the, oh, I'm mind reading. I can tell, what you had for dinner last night and what secret you're keeping.
Yeah. And then that brings us to, I think, time next, just because he's manipulating people, and then end on magical for
Yeah.
whatever
Well,
his
and I
final.
think magical can be sprinkled through all of them.
Yeah.
You kind of pick with each of your 3 actions what role you're going to do, but you can mix multiple traits into each role.
Fair enough. Now we've got these 3 different acts. Do we have a plot hook for each one?
I think we kind of got the pixie and how to bring him in with the druid clan. I can bring in the giant and the mouse from the evil circus if I would like. have them leave the evil circus as well when they hear about the success of our circus.
You could also have them show up as NPCs that recognize your player who escaped.
Yes, I could.
You got out, and it inspired us to get out too.
Yes, yeah. I like that. And then the skeleton you said was going to be a longtime friend of the deceased ringleader.
Yeah.
And he heard the news of what happened, and he wanted to come pay his respects and be a part of the legacy that he left. Because after thousands of years, he finally found some sort of a purpose in life.
Do we want the hypnotist to... So we're solving the mystery of how the ringleader died, right?
Yes. The stat block that I showed you, she literally comes out the night after the performance and says, "I did it, it was me." So it's not much of a mystery on how he died, but now we're on to the why.
Do we want our skeleton hypnotist to show up and spurn the players forward every time that they get off track with something? The skeleton will magically pop up and be like, we have higher priorities.
I think I like that because you know a thing or two about how my players are gonna act. One of them, the one that just says, "I'm gonna do this, now make it happen." We played a one shot and his character just wanted a cabbage from the cabbage stall. And we literally spent like 5 minutes on him. "I want this cabbage." Okay, fine, have a cabbage.
That just sounds like literally every player I've ever met. Even Dan got distracted by an elephant tied to a tree one time. That derailed us for about 10 minutes. So he tried to befriend an elephant.
Jeez. No, my other player, he will often go, "This is the objective, let's do it, let's go," and he railroads himself.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those at the table too. That's Dave and Charlie for me, is they are eyes on the prize, right? So
I can absolutely see that from Dave.
Yeah. Now we just need to name them. This is the hardest and the final thing. Now that we know who these people are, we got to give them names.
Isn't that the hard part? That literally is the hardest part.
Now, I usually have the other hosts will, when it comes to naming and whatnot, they will type in, fantasy name generator, and they will use the one that pops up. And I find that I absolutely hate it. I absolutely hate the fantasy name generator because I find it to be the basic bitch of name generators.
That's fair. I like to, anytime I go on fantasy name generator, I hit refresh approximately 50 times.
Yeah.
Until I find some combination of everything that I actually liked.
Yeah, I often find that a lot of the names there are, especially the ones that aren't words, they're just like weird elven noises or weird goblin noises. And
yeah,
I will grab syllables out of different ones and smash them together to find the thing I like.
I could, if I want to make my players absolutely love the pixie, his name is going to be Pickles.
Pickles the pixie. Now,
Pickles the pixie.
Is that the stage name?
Ooh, because part of me wants to say yes and give him more of a serious name, but also, what if that's just his nickname that he goes by and that's not his real name?
What if a fake creature never tells you their real name? You can call me Pickles.
I like it. Yep. Or he very early in life lost his actual name, so that's just the name that he found that works for him.
Our hypnotist, we already called him Dr. Bones. What was his name in life?
What is the oldest archaic name you can think of from thousands of years
all right, hold on
ago?
He is Archibald von, I don't know. It's got to be one of these old-timey European names. Old European surnames. Does he have a British accent?
We absolutely can, but I think Archibald Von and something British is just enough clashing to make it work.
Can you roll a D20?
Yep.
We're going to find out what letter it starts with. I've pulled up a list of old-timey names.
11.
That is a K. Killingworth is a little on the nose.
Archibald Von Killingworth.
Von Kinnersley, Von Kingswood, Archibald Kingsbury.
I like it. Archibald Kingsbury.
And every time he introduces himself off stage, Archibald Kingsbury of the Northern Kingsburys, right?
Archibald Kingsbury the 16th of the Northern Kingsburys.
Yeah.
And you're
The
like, that family tree ended like 5,000 years ago, sir.
Too soon. The Northern Kingsburys.
Make him old school friends with the dead god that whose power we have to harness.
Love it. Do we want to lean into the giant being relatively dumb or no?
I don't think if they're never gonna speak, part of me is like, make them a genius, and when they do speak, it's like, holy shit, that was smart. Or just when they do speak, you're like, I bet you ate rocks for breakfast. Either one. It has to be one of the two extremes, though.
Yeah, like eat any good books lately, buddy? I think that we should give him a dumb name and high intelligence.
Perfect.
And will he never
How
speaks on
about
stage?
Oscar, right? Dumb names.
Let's go with it. Let's do it.
Yep, Dan's gonna kill us.
Never speaks on stage, however, is absolutely intelligent and verbose backstage.
Only speaks in haikus.
I'm gonna spell Oscar with a K just so we drive that home for Dan.
Just for Dan.
And then like we could just like Grandma Whiskers. But like, do we want do we want to give a real name or is Grandma Whiskers enough?
I like Grandma Whiskers. I played a goblin warlock for a one-shot with a group of online friends. My whole premise was Big Titty Voodoo Mama Goblin.
You know,
and I never came up with a name, so I just made them all call her Mama.
Sometimes that's all you need.
It was a one-shot. Like, come on, you don't need more.
I am going to grab a screenshot of this and drop it into our Discord chat so that you can see it.
Heck yeah.
And I'm also going to drop it in as on the Patreon when this episode airs so that people can see them.
I love it.
But before we go any further into it, let me summarize then what I've got here. We have a skeleton hypnotist who is at this point male. We said it's androgyny, but clearly we've skewed male on this. So
I think, yeah.
Thousands of years old. He's bold and loud and creepy on stage and is an old soul behind the scenes. He's got a personal relationship with the ringleader who is dead and also probably knows the professor pretty well as well. His trick is called Dr. Bones's Magnificent Mind Manipulations. And he had the traits for the trick are audience, emotion, time, and magical. His purpose is that he keeps the players on task with the dead ringleader mystery. And his real name, which they may learn if they know him well enough, is the Archibald Kingsbury, the 16th of the Northern Kingsburys.
And he will introduce it in full every time.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time someone calls him Archibald, he will correct them. Because players will call him Archie. We know that, right? That'll just be their shorthand for him. Yeah, let's go find out what Archie's doing. So
never say it to his face.
Never say it to his face. He doesn't have nostrils, and yet somehow they flare every time they do that. So the card magician is a pixie who is a male, but he is 3 years old. He's hyperactive and overconfident, but also has a gambling addiction. He's suckered a whole bunch of druids into gambling with them, and they're in debt to him, and they will need help with that later. His act is called the Trixie Pixie, and he starts off with an alchemical smoke cloud, dives right into audience participation, and then focuses on all sorts of card tricks. This is going to include prop, audience, and alchemical. And his name is Pickles. His real name is unknown to the players, maybe even to him as well. We've got a lance-throwing act, the Giant Lancer Dancer, which is a giant male in his mid-20s and a ratfolk female who is elderly. He is a silent dancer who never speaks on stage, but is hyper intelligent and very verbose backstage. She is talkative and sweet grandmotherly type. They hang out with Axel of the Axel's Amazing Aviary fame and 9 other rat folk. You damn well know they're going to start asking for names, so you might want to flesh those out at some point.
I will. They will want to know names.
They were inspired to leave the evil circus by the player that did, and they followed in their footsteps to join this carnival, this circus. And their names are Oscar and Grandma Whiskers. I love this. This is freaking amazing. How bad is Oscar going to feel if Grandma Whiskers gets hurt?
Well, I think he'd live up to the namesake of Oscar.
Well, I like the idea of the injury roll is actually Oscar because his nerves are shaken. And he just feels too
Yes.
bad. I can't do it. She's like, it was just a scratch.
Yep. Yep. I like it.
So I love these 3 acts. This was a lot of fun. So 4 characters, 3 acts, 3 different plot hooks, one that's tied into the initial mystery, one for a future plot hook involving the druids, and one with a backstory tied to one of the players. We've talked about a lot of different NPC jobs around circuses and whatnot, as well as some interesting mechanics here. Is there anything else, any final thoughts that you have about this topic?
No, I mean, I think that just about covered all of it for my circus. I appreciate the help. It's going to be a lot of fun.
This was a blast. I have wanted to do circus stuff, and I had in my campaign, Dan, Charlie, and Dave were all circus performers, but we never get to see the circus. They came into the world and they would talk about it, but we never got to play with it. And they were, in fact, the players were at odds about, is the circus they were part of evil behind the scenes, or what were their jobs, or who else was there? And so we never really got to play into it. This is a blast. And Dan's character is the only one of the 3 of them that's still alive in our campaign. And I'm going to 100% bring these characters forward as circus performers that will drop through a portal and be like, hey, remember me?
I love it. I love it. No, and I think you could easily take these circus subsets and apply them to 5th edition. I mean, it's skill checks and additional traits that work with the skills. I think this is easily something you could adapt into 5th edition.
100%. This is if you wanted to do this, you just make it a skill challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially all it is a skill challenge, or you can do an attack roll, or you can do a saving throw. That's all in 5th edition.
Yep, makes perfect sense. Do you have any people, personal social media or projects or anything you'd like to mention or shout out before we wrap up?
Well, just my players. They're the real MVPs here. They originally were like, okay, fine, this is something you want to do. I'll humor you and do this. And now they're asking me midweek, what are we doing? What do we prepare for? Like, how can I help out? One of them curates my music, and I appreciate him so much for that. They're the stars of the show. You don't have a game without your players, so I appreciate them.
That's awesome. You gonna shut them up by name, or are you just gonna leave them in anonymity?
I didn't ask them if they were okay with me putting their names out on the internet, so I won't do it.
Fair enough. So that's all for our discussion on building circus NPCs. Thank you, Scott, for choosing this topic, for sitting down to create this with me, and for supporting the Patreon. Thank you for listening to another episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website, www.itsamimic.com, a store with some It's a Mimic merch, and a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
Cue theme song. That's not even how it goes.
That's not even close to how it goes, but it's still more accurate than half of the time when Brad does that. And he does it every time we cut to either intro or outro music.
I love it.